Good evening. Hopefully we'll be wrapping up both the quarter and our class. I'm going to review for a bit. Last week we had started with how to talk to a dying person, trying to not say the wrong thing, to try to help them. And again, I urge you, do not avoid talking to someone if they're dying. They need people to be around them, and a lot of people avoid them because it reminds them of death, and they're trying not to think of it. The first thing I said was that you want to establish this personal relationship with them instead of avoiding them. You want to eliminate any distractions with the hearing, television, radio, anything like that. Let them decide how long the visit is. Do not be afraid to ask them, do you need to rest? If they look at them and if they look like they're hurting and need to rest, ask them, do you want me to leave? Do you need to rest? Let them tell you. Don't insist that they accept their impending death, and don't get them to deny it if it is already accepted. And number 5, allow them to express their true feelings. You're going to get some true feelings. You will get down to some base information, I will guarantee you. Number 6, if they want to discuss recovery or treatment, do it. If they don't bring it up. Number 7, encourage them to talk with others if they want to. Tell them, is there anybody that you need me to contact? Anybody that you want that you want to see? I'll go talk to them, or I'll call them and say they'd like to talk to you. And many times, both the dying person and the person talking to them will be apprehensive about asking certain things. So come out and ask them. Do you need to talk to somebody? Let me help. Encourage them to reminisce about good times or what heaven will be like. Maybe look through family photos. Listen to favorite songs. Discuss stories of, if you lived with this person, you know some of those things. Talk about the good times. Remember those times. Number 9, never pass up the chance to express love or say goodbye. Tell them it's all right for them to go if they wish. I'm going to be covering this again. There are a lot of things that happen at death that will send chills up your spine. When you really get to know what happens, I highly recommend a book called On Death and Dying by, I believe, Dr. Kubler. That is the best book available. But hospice workers can tell you some things. People will wait for some people, certain person to arrive, and they will will themselves to die when that happens. Or they will wait until no one is present and will themselves to die at that moment. Sometimes it's a good thing for the spouse to tell them it's all right for you to go. One of the things they're going to be waiting for is they're waiting to make sure their spouse is taken care of. Once they know their spouse is taken care of, they're willing to let go and quit fighting. Sing religious or encouraging songs. Many times when I go to the hospital and there's a patient that's not able to really communicate very well, and I don't even know what to say, I will take some songs with me and sing them. It's one of those things, what are you going to do? If they can't reply back, do something, let them know you're there. We hear many times that those that are in comas can hear what's going on or aware of what's going on. I don't know one way or another. But if they are, it's a good thing to do with them. Always, when in doubt, pray. Pray and hold hands if you can. The touch is important. It will be emotional. There's no way around it. I have been asked, how do you cope with it? Well, I'll tell you, sometimes I cry. And many times whenever I'm taking on with a time with a person who has just contracted cancer or something, and we know they're on their way out, it will flood me with memories of the others that I have gone through this with. It's going to be emotional. So just prepare for it. Now let's talk about a situation that I've encountered several times, whether or not to withdraw life support from a relative. I've had several members who are worried that they were killing their relatives if they took them off life support. First of all, we need to understand what life support is. Life support is when a person is being medically extended past the point where they would normally die. Medical advances have made this possible, but it's not necessarily a good thing all the time. 100 years ago, when a person got to that point, they would develop infections, have heart attacks or strokes, or some other condition which would result in their death. In other words, the point of death was in God's hands exclusively. With these medical advances, we've taken away something that God would have control over and would determine. So by withdrawing life support, we're placing the determination of death back in the hands of God. That's what I want you to understand. You are not condemning your relative to death if you decide to take them off life support. But there are some Christians that are really, really worried about that. The most common situation that I've encountered is when a person is declared brain dead. That means that their brain is no longer functioning, but medical devices have taken over keeping the vital organs working. In reality, without these devices, the body would have died. So we should not make a medical decision out of fear that we're somehow murdering the loved one. What can we surmise about the hereafter? The Bible talks very little about a lot of subjects. Not a lot about angels, not a lot about Satan, really. Doesn't tell us a whole lot about heaven, just kind of bits and pieces. If we go to Luke chapter 16, verses 9 through 31, it gives us a glimpse of what it may be like when persons die. Now there was a rich man, and he habitually dressed in purple and fine linen, joyously living in splendor every day. And a poor man named Lazarus was laid at his gate, covered with sores, and longing to be fed with the crumbs which were falling from the rich man's table. Besides, even the dogs were coming and licking his sores. Now the poor man died and was carried away by angels to Abraham's bosom. So there's the first thing we can pick up. It appears, at least when a Christian dies, an angel comes immediately and escorts them to wherever they are going to wait. And the rich man also died and was buried. Doesn't say what happens to him other than that he goes. In Hades, he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his bosom. So we do know, if this is correct, the person who is not right with God will be in a place of torment, and he can see the saved somewhere in the distance. He can see what has happened, and it appears that he recognizes who's over there, which would mean he would have a memory of his life. To me, that and a loss of hope would probably be worse than even the fire. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus so that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your life you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. But now he is being comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you, there is a great chasm fixed, so that all those who wish to come over from here to you will not be able, and that you may not cross over there to us. We don't know, because this passage doesn't say, if Lazarus could see the rich man, but the rich man could see Lazarus. We don't know if those in the place of comfort even want to come over if they could see. But obviously those in torment would like to go over, so that would be part of the torment. And he said, then I beg you, Father, that you send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, in order that he may warn them, so they will not also come to this place of torment. But Abraham said, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. But he said, no, Father Abraham, if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But he said to them, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophet, they will not be persuaded, even if someone rises from the dead. So I think we can surmise that once death takes place and they're in a fixed position, there's no doing anything for those back in the world. Wouldn't help anyway. I mean, look at the children of Israel. They were in slavery. They saw all those the things that were done, the locusts, the hail, the killing of the firstborn. They watched the entire Egyptian army wiped out, and 3 days later, they were ready to go back in slavery. So people are people. Besides, if somebody came back from the dead, they might kick the bucket then. Angels will protect and transport the faithful to a place of comfort, if we could go by this passage. So the first thing we're going to see after death will be an angel. That should be a comforting thought for the faithful. A Christian shouldn't be terrified of dying. May be apprehensive. It's the unknown. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we shouldn't be terrified. We'll look at some verses later that should comfort and encourage us as Christians. And these might be the verses that you would share with someone if they're very apprehensive. So why should a Christian not be terrified of death? 1 Peter 1, 3 through 9 says, Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not fade away, reserved in heaven for you, who are protected by the power of God through faith. So there's an inheritance. It's imperishable and undefiled. It's pure. It will not fade away, and it is reserved. God has put a reserve sign in heaven for the faithful. For a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time, in this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And through you, and though you have not seen him, you love him. And though you do not see him now, but believe in him, you greatly rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, obtaining as the outcome of your faith the salvation of your souls. So maybe we need to reread the verses that tell us to be comforted, to look forward to it. John 10, 27 through 30 says, My sheep shall hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give eternal life to them, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. So God is going to protect the faithful. Satan will not be able to touch you. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hands. In Romans 8:1, therefore there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Plain and simple. 1 John 5:13, these things I have written to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know you have eternal life. Sometimes we don't comprehend the directness of that verse. What's the purpose of that verse? God is trying to tell us, if we're faithful, we do the best we can. We try our best to follow him and be the faithful. We can know that we are saved. I know that some of us in the churches of Christ, we kind of get worried, I did this one thing wrong. Well, Paul did a lot of things wrong, but looks like he's going to heaven. One little thing is not going to keep us out of heaven. We have to kind of understand a little bit about grace. Yes, we have to live the good life, but God tells us about grace. And then the verse that we hear all the time at funerals, Revelation 21, 1-4. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and now there is no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain, for the first things have passed away. I think of the song when things get a little bit tough, heaven must surely be worth it all. But it is hard to remember that when we're in the middle of a trial. But I think God wants us to be assured by these verses. Keep at it. Stay faithful. Don't give up. God has promised, God is faithful, and he will fulfill his promises. Here's another thing to be careful about. Be careful not to say inappropriate things during a time like this or after a death has occurred. For instance, it was God's will, or they're in a better place. Whether it's true or not, there are some people who are having their faith shaken to the core during this time. And this doesn't set well with them. What you need to do is either say nothing, and we can't seem to get past that. It's all right to say nothing. But if you must say something, express empathy or sympathy for them. Tell them you're here. I'm sorry you're having to go through this, but don't add a whole lot to it. Some people's faith is wavering. You don't want to cause them to drift further away from God during this time. They're already questioning God, perhaps. Just be there. Silence is all right as long as you're there and you're supporting them. But it's so easy to say the wrong thing during this time period. There are some common stages of emotions that are seen in people before they die. As I read through this, this is not so much for most Christians. I have not seen a whole lot of this. Seems to be primarily for non-Christians. But we may see parts of this. And I'm going to try to give you some things that I have seen that you need to be careful about. It's very common for those facing death to experience a pattern of these changing emotions and feelings. Not everyone's going to feel them. I'm going to use the word patient as we go through this to identify the person facing death in these examples. Number one, denial and isolation. They may say, no, not me. This can't be true. I'm not going to die. They refuse to believe what's going to happen. Some people are unwilling to face the reality, and they may not be willing to accept it. Even a caregiver's attitude may influence this. You can have a doctor who's so afraid of death and talking about it that he will refuse to talk to the patient about it, or a caregiver. So this could go either way. Don't try to force the person if they are not ready. This is usually a temporary defense, and it will be replaced by partial acceptance most of the time as you go on. Some people will be very highly selective about who they will open up to and share their feelings. Usually those that they will share with the ones who seem to truly care about them and their situation. So that's what I'm saying. If you're there for them, if you're listening, if you visit them, they will most likely open up to you, whereas they may not do it with everyone. Number two is anger. If the denial stage can't be maintained, it may be replaced by anger, rage, envy, and or resentment. It'll be difficult for the family and the medical staff to cope with this phase, as this will be expressed randomly at some times and at anyone maybe that comes in contact with them. The patient may be angry or resentful, but they will not be able to complete some project, enjoy retirement, see their family grow, or live longer. Any long list of things. They get to thinking about this, and they get angry that they can't do that. They may lash out, raise their voice, make demands, or complain, trying to get attention. It's easy for those around them to take these things personally, but you have to kind of let it fall off your back to the best of your ability. Realize what's going on with them. Realize what is happening in their mind. If you can't, let's say a caretaker or a relative, they may avoid being around them because they don't want to be lashed out at. It's a hard thing to stay with it, but we need to try to do the best we can. It's important for everyone to try to be non-judgmental or detached during this time period. Next comes bargaining. Once the patient realizes the situation can't be ignored, they may try to bargain with God for more time. This is an attempt to postpone the inevitable. Usually, these pleas are kept secret or they're only talked about to clergy or in confidence. The patient may make promises to attend church more regularly, be a better person, be more faithful to God if they're given more time. And sometimes this stage is fueled by guilt felt by the patients. Same thing we see in battle. God, please save me from this battle and I'll be faithful. Try to bargain with God. Next, depression. As their condition worsens and they can no longer deny that the end is near, the patient may go into depression feeling they've expressed a great loss, which they have and they are. Actually, this phase is a preparation for death. They may be very gloomy and detached. Those around them should not insist that they look at the sunny side of life. Don't do it. Don't try to push them to be more happy. They are preparing for death. And I don't care what if you know you're going, you know you're going to leave your loved ones, and that's not a very pleasant experience. The patient is in the process of losing everything and everybody that they love. They should be allowed to express their feelings freely and without judgment. It's especially important during this phase to recognize the importance of touch and just being present. It's not a lot of time for words. Just be there. The patient needs to make peace with his or her situation. They've lost hope of hanging on to life, and it grieves them greatly. I told you back whenever I was talking about what happens when someone goes away on business, where like I did, where I went to foreign countries and was gone for a long period of time. I realized I would detach emotionally. Debbie would detach emotionally. It's a preparation for what's to come. Sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it. Finally, you have acceptance. If a patient has had enough time to work through all these phases, they're finally going to reach a state of acceptance of their situation. There will be a deep sense of peace if this comes, and they're ready to face whatever they need to. During this time, it may be necessary again for a spouse to say, "It's all right for you to go." But of course, you need to truly believe that. Don't say that and be unfeeling. It's especially important to say goodbyes at this point if it's not been done. If a patient verbally expresses a loss of hope for recovery, that means they say, I'm near death, I'm going. They're generally going to be gone within 24 hours. They're going to detach themselves from all those around them. When this time comes, relatives or spouses may feel an overwhelming need to be present when the person dies. Now, this is an admirable desire, but you need to be careful. This is not always possible. One should not feel guilty if they had some reason they had to be gone, they had to sleep. When a patient has been in dire condition for a long time, the caregiver, the relative, is completely worn out. And they have to go sleep, go eat, do something else. As I said before, there are some times that a patient will literally will themselves to death when everyone leaves the room. For some reason, they don't want anyone to be there. Maybe it's a feeling of they don't want to traumatize them. But I've seen it several times. When a loved one wasn't present, they felt guilty. Sometimes it can't be helped. You don't know when the time will come. Even when you're withdrawing life support from someone, I try to prepare a family. They may not pass away immediately. They may last for hours or days after the life support is withdrawn. I want them to be ready for that so that they're not shocked if it continues on. So what do we do when death occurs? I hate to say this, but number one, you need to secure any valuables or money. I've had some valuables that came up missing almost immediately. Things like rings or watches. You need to try to get a hold of them, and because every once in a while someone will steal them. You'll need to notify a funeral home or crematorium that'll pick up and prepare the body. That's why you do the preparation ahead of time. You know who to call. If the person dies in the hospital, the first thing they're going to ask is, who's going to pick up the body? You need to have that information available at that time. You'll need to make funeral or memorial arrangements. Now, funeral homes, during your time with them, will generally help you with a whole lot of these things. Social Security, if the person is drawing it, will have to be notified. They'll help you do that. Here's another note. If someone dies and they have a Social Security payment that arrives after their death, you need to make sure that money stays in the bank because Uncle Sam will be recollecting it. Don't spend it. Do you want to put an obituary in the paper? Have to write one up. You might want to have a list of all the relatives. Do it up ahead of time. That's that preparation for death. Do you need a place to have a funeral or memorial service? You know, if you're having a funeral here, you need to see Keegan. Keegan's in charge of arranging the use of this building. And that way it will be set up. If it's a funeral home, you conduct it with a funeral home. Do you need lodging for family or visitors that are coming? What are you going to do about meals? Obviously, those of us in the church, a lot of the time, we don't have to worry about that. We've got somebody most of the time taking care of meals. You need to give notice to speakers. You need to let someone know if you're wanting audio visual or meal preparers. My job is never predictable. If I wait until the last minute to try to do something, there will be half a dozen things that cannot wait, which will come up. So if I'm trying to do a funeral and I don't get the information I need to put it together for that funeral, I will not be able to do a good job with it. Anyone that's speaking needs to have as much time in advance as possible to prepare what they're going to say. I'll reemphasize what Rex and I do. Rex generally does a spiritual lesson. I try to give an individual type situation. I want some personal stories, preferably humorous ones, to lighten the moment, to think of the good times. You'll need death certificates. If you have to collect insurance, if you have to do anything else, you will need a copy of a death certificate. And there's two different kinds of death certificates. Help me out on this one. What's the most in-depth one that's needed? Okay. Just be aware there are two different kinds of death certificates. They will cost you, but they're not that expensive. It's much better to pay for extra death certificates and not need them than to need them and not be able to have them. So I would say get 8 to 10. If you have insurance policy, stocks and bonds, need to coordinate with the bank, have that many on hand. You'll need to cancel credit card companies, voter registration, driver's license, all those kinds of things. You need to cancel their email, their social media accounts. And one of the things you need to keep in mind when you're developing an obituary or you're doing all these other things is be aware of identity theft. It's become a problem. Do not mention publicly birth dates, any kind of social security numbers, anything that can be used like that. This is one that catches a lot of people who, spouses especially, when their spouse dies suddenly. They may feel anger or bitterness towards their dead spouse for leaving them alone to contend with life. I don't know how many times this has happened, and I tell them ahead of time, it's okay. You're going to feel this perhaps. Just don't dwell on it. But just because you feel anger at them, there's not anything wrong with you. Most of the time, what that means is they say, okay, I'm not special. I'm not the only one this happens to. And I guarantee you, it's not the only one that it happens to. Grief is different for everyone. It lasts for different lengths of time. It manifests itself in different ways. I try to tell people, you're going to be anywhere. You're going to hear a song. You're going to smell a smell. You're going to remember a birth date or an anniversary. You're going to see something special. You're going to smell a certain smell and you will break out in tears. Go ahead and cry. That's part of grief. You have to deal with it. There's nothing wrong with you. If you're worried somebody else is going to see you, then crawl off in a closet somewhere. But go ahead and cry. With any luck, over time, this will lessen. Most of the time, this gets less and less sensitive over time. We remember the good times and kind of forget the pain of their loss. You're going to perhaps go into depression whenever a loved one dies. You won't want to do anything. That's too is common. I encourage you to make yourself do one thing. A lot of the time there will be medical forms that need to be filled out. There will be follow-up on life insurance. All these things that will need to be done. They have to be done. Don't worry about doing all of them. Prioritize them, obviously, the most important things, and do one. If you can, do two. If you can't, wait till the next day and then start over again. You may want to do something to stay busy, such as taking their clothes, doing something. This gets to a sensitive point. A lot of people do not want to touch the clothes, the personal belongings. They don't want anything to go anywhere. That's going to have to be your personal decision. But don't wallow in it. You'll stay in depression longer if you do that. You need to do something. One of the things that also I want to just mention, I've talked about what happens a lot of the time as people prepare to die. There are things that happen when they die that will send chills up your spine. For instance, when Jack Strachan, so many of you know him, passed away, he had been in the hospital bed all day long. It was a good Scottish day with rain and clouds all day long, dreary as can be. Sometime about mid-afternoon, the clouds broke. A ray of sunshine came through the window onto Jack Strachan. He sat up, reached his hand up and spoke to someone, laid back, and died. And that is not an uncommon experience. There's so many things that we do not know. That's why we have to rely on God is there. God will protect us. Whatever has happened, if they're faithful, God will send an angel to take care of them. Already I have met with someone this week who has a loved one that is about to die and wanted some reassurance on what he needs to do. Some of this you may not have absorbed. You may have tried to put it out of your mind. If you come to that point, come to talk to me. I'll try to help you. I'll try to give you paperwork so that you can look through it to remember some of the things you do. But again, don't avoid it. It will be emotional. Be reassured by the Bible what God has said will be true. I'm going to leave you with some things, a couple of slides here that just happen to be, this is freebies, pass on. Some reasons why joy and happiness eludes us. Number one, we do not plan time for rest. There's an importance for vacations. There's an importance for sometimes sitting down for an hour or two and just vegetating. We rarely feel the joy of accomplishment. Some of you, I know I have experienced this a lot. My life was so busy that I did not have time to really appreciate things. It seems that when you get in the Army says, okay, we got you, you're mine, now go here. So when I graduated college, I couldn't go through graduation. I had to get in the car and head for Fort Benning. When I got my master's degree at the University of Louisville, I couldn't go to graduation. I had to get in the car and come here to Tampa. We need to, if possible, try to celebrate our accomplishments. Maybe something small, going out to eat, just having a party. But it is important that we plan and appreciate our accomplishments. We owe more than we can repay. We need to be careful about what we buy when we start getting ourselves in debt. Do we really need it? If we're $10,000, $20,000 in debt and no hope of paying that off anytime soon, it's not going to be a pleasant situation. We buy things to make us happy. We think that buying this is going to make us happy. No. There's always, okay, I need something else. I need something else. Some people carry this to extremes. They will literally go out and shop even though everything they buy they do not need, they don't really even want, but they're grasping for that feeling that it'll make me happy. We hold on to things too hard. I think about someone who loses their home in a fire. They lose everything that they've accumulated. Maybe they've lost all their photos, all their memories, all their inheritances, you name it. I've heard of people that voluntarily get rid of a whole bunch of stuff, and they say, I really felt better after I was unburdened by all these things. We say yes to too many things. This is sometimes a bad thing with church people. We think we have to do everything, so we won't say no. You need to keep your family and yourself in mind when you take on workloads. Don't try to do everything, and it's all right to say no. And last of all, we do not have time for God. Do we pass up reading our Bibles because we're watching movies or we're going to the beach or there's nothing wrong with going to the beach. There's nothing wrong with watching movies. But do we put God off in the process? 20 Habits of Happy Couples. This goes back and we'll rehash some of the things that I said in our marriage class. They make time for one another. You need to be together always. Even as you grow older, you need that time together. You need to kiss each other goodnight whenever you leave. Don't be afraid to kiss someone. One of the things that I see is someone says, I wish I'd hugged them longer. I didn't know it was the last time I was going to do that. I wish I had kissed them. I didn't know it was going to be the last time. They say, I love you daily. Not like the old man who says, if I change my mind, I'll let you know. I told you I loved you 30 years ago. Say it anyway. They communicate their feelings. If we don't communicate the feelings, we may have guesswork. You may guess when someone comes home from work and they bite at you that you've done something wrong. No, not necessarily. Maybe work was terrible. Communicate feelings. Let your spouse know. Learn their love languages. We talked about that. If they want flowers, give them flowers. If they want the car washed, wash the car. Do what gets you the feeling that, hey, this is worth it. I'm willing to do this. I don't want to waste time on the things that's not going to be accepted. They have date nights. Even when you've been married 30, 40, 50 years, you need to have a date night, something to go out. They make sacrifices. Is there something that your spouse wants to do that you're not that interested in? Try to do something they want to do. They give each other space. We need to be together as marriage, but we do not need to be totally dependent upon each other all the time. You may need to retain your own hobbies or your own interests that your spouse is not interested in. As long as you devote time with your spouse, it's all right if you have some time for yourself. They laugh together. This one we can slip into if we don't watch it when we get stressed out. There's nothing quite like sharing a good laugh. I think about, someone washing a car and you see them and they turn the hose on the other individual and then you get in a soap fight. And, when someone's been married 30 or 40 years and that happens, you can have a good laugh. They always have each other's backs. Be careful and watch out for your spouse. Take up for them. Don't make fun of them in public. If something's going to make them look bad, don't do it. I hope the classes both on marriage and on preparing for death have helped you. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, be sure and see me. It's been good to have a chance to share this with you, and you're dismissed for the night. Thank you.